I'm back in the happiest place in the entire world. And I got a huge smile on my face because I get to share one of my great friends with you today. I think he's probably one of the most interesting men in the world and the only person that has ever been forced to do press. This is the first man that I've ever met in my life that told me he had a full-time representative keeping him out of the press for most of his life. He's probably, in my sense, every single time I have a sit down and I get a chance to be able to talk with Larry, we uncover a different story, and that's why I wanted to share him with you today. He's the founder of the E-Entertainment Network. In addition to so many things that you guys are going to hear about, I don't even want to continue on with the introduction because I want to get right to Larry. It is my honor, my pleasure to bring to you one of my good friends, Larry Namer, who is honestly changing the world. So why don't we just get this party started?
Achieving, cause we believing it's for certain. We put the work in. We ain't stopped just because it's hurting right before your eyes. So it's coming to no surprise. The takeover is televised over and over and over again. Make no mistake, we continue to win. Defeat never known, cause I will not lose. They wanna mimic my moves, but can't walk in my shoes.
Russia, Putin, Coney Island, the Kardashians, China, and a glass eye. How did all these connect, Larry?
God. It's funny, because, you and a lot of other people have been bugging me to write the book for years, and I didn't do it, and because I wasn't ready to write a last chapter. I'm still not ready to write the last chapter, but in writing the book, I had to dig back on these things that, I haven't thought about in years and years and years. And, but, it's all part of my, my life story, from starting, growing up in Brooklyn, Coney Island, the hood, and then working in the sewers of Manhattan, putting the wires together, and then coming out to LA and building the first 61 channel two-way cable system and starting E, and then running off to Russia and having a #1 TV show in Russia for 11 years, and gotten bored of that and went to China and started programming in Mandarin for, in a language I don't speak, for an audience I didn't grow up with, and, in a culture I didn't necessarily understand. And then with COVID, kind of back in the US doing stuff here. I mean, still doing China, but doing a lot of stuff in the US again, and most of which, I have to say, kind of has a social impact component to it. I don't want to just do entertainment. I want to have some positive effect on the planet.
Well, you've said in the past that you're on a apology tour. I loved this part of it. But why, everyone else in the world that I'm around is always, I've got to self-promote. I've got to have my book. I've got to do this. You were actually almost forced. Your hand was almost forced to do the book because your life is so interesting. Why hold back as much as you have?
Well, I like my private life, and and I really wanted my kids to grow up to be very normal. I didn't want them to be, spoiled little Hollywood kids, and then for that I've actually done a pretty good job. They're like the most normal kids you'll ever find. Most of the time. Once in a while, they slip off the deep end. But I just I don't take Hollywood that seriously.
Uh-huh.
And that's one of the reasons why I think I've been successful, is I just brought a fresh new look to it. It's not like we're, doing, rocket science or curing disease or anything like that. It's light and funny and should be treated that way. And, and then I like to, finish the day and go home and watch TV and play with my little grandbaby and do all of that stuff. So, um, a lot of it is just, you have to do ego driven. I'll do press now, particularly now. If it's a project that I'm involved in, or if it's a charity, particularly for children, or if it's something that would help a friend, I'll do it all the time. but just to get my face on the cover of a magazine or something, just it doesn't really mean much to me.
What was the differences when you went into China? Because you were talking about it earlier, where you went into a place where you didn't grow up in the culture, you didn't you didn't really connect with the audience, they're people, but you didn't grow up in the culture. And what about some of the things that you went through and challenges you went through? Because you're the only writer that's in the Chinese market that's not from China. Am I correct?
Yeah, I think we're still the only Western company that's allowed to be involved in media in China, and a lot of it just goes from the way I was brought up. I mean, my parents were immigrant parents, and their aspirations for their children were get a civil service job and retire at 65 with a pension and be secure. And obviously, I didn't follow that route, but I always give this example, because people say, how are you successful in China and Russia? I mean, again, 5 days a week for 11 years, we were the number one TV show in Russia. Um, well, after my father passed, my mother was living in Florida, and I would go visit her, and I'd say, "Hey, tonight I want to go to Italian food at 8 o'clock," and she'd go, "No, we're going to go to the deli at 5:30." And I'm like, "Well, I don't eat at 5:30." And my mom would just say, "Listen, you're a guest in this house. If you don't like the rules, go stay somewhere else." And I've kind of taken that to all the countries that I go to. I'm not there to change their governments or their political beliefs or their religious beliefs. I'm there to give them a smile on their face before they go to sleep, so they can wake up the next morning smiling. And that's kind of it. I'm a guest in their house, and like my mother always said, if you don't really like the rules, go somewhere else.
Let's talk about this off script and the recipes for success, because food is such a connector, right? So if you sit
Yeah.
down, you and I went to the barbecue place right outside of. It's James Dixon said it was right outside of Nashville. That was not right outside of Nashville. That was pretty
No.
far. But our
Yeah.
first experience there was actually at Rosie's Mexican food. It was a phenomenal experience, and we communed over food. Like, how has that, you being in so many different cultures, and how has the food brought people together?
Well, I think, and I think that's universal. I think food definitely brings people together. Every country that I've gone to. I mean, in Russia, when I was started there, it was still the Soviet Union when I was doing stuff there, and they were going through really, really bad hardships with food shortages, and everything was in deficit and stuff. But when you met people, they would invite you to their house, and they would literally empty the refrigerator for their guests. I mean, it was like the food was what connected us Americans with the Russians and stuff like that. You'd eat there, and in China, it's very interesting because while it's different, it's very much the same. It ties together with food and drinks. Um, you go to work and you kind of end at about 6:30 at night, and you go out for like business dinners every night, and you do that, and then you kind of go back to work, and then you finally get home at 11 o'clock at night. Um, but again, it's the that ritual of sitting down and just relaxing and having a drink and eating food with folks and getting to know them a little more.
What about the relationship side? Because it seems to me every time that you and I sit down and talk, I uncover another story. So I'm looking forward to that today, to be shocked. Although I'm not shocked with you, Larry, because I know that every single time I'm getting a haymaker when we hang out. But when you started off, say in Russia, the relationships that you built with certain people really opened doors. But there's a lot of people that lead with the networking part of it. Whereas you, when I've seen you at different events and we've been together, you're really making true connections as opposed to trying to see what that person is doing. How important is that as far as the relationships? And take us to Russia early on and some of the relationships that really helped you to move forward.
Sure. I mean, for me, it's always been a lot. Again, it goes back, a lot of stuff goes back to my parents. I mean, they were just super strict, and you had to be a good person before anything else, and that's always stuck with me. But when I was started in Russia, I started doing a favor to a friend who was a lawyer who had some clients that were in merchant banking, and somebody proposed an entertainment deal to them. And, my lawyer friend said, "Hey, would you go there with them?" I was still at E at the time. And, I said, "Yeah, go to Russia. That sounds cool. I'll do that." So I went there, and I liked it, and the people were great and friendly. Like I say, people with nothing would invite you to their house and give you the last piece of bread in their house, and I just kind of love that part of it. But the mayor of St. Petersburg asked me. He said, "Hey, would you help me start a music festival so we could raise money for the children's hospital and the orphanage?" And I was like, "Well, I don't really do music. I don't know anything about music." And he went, "Well, you got to know more than I do." And I went, "Yeah, all right, that's probably true." So me and the mayor, we started this thing called the White Nights Festival. It was a 6-day rock festival every year, June 16th to June 21st. It was called White Nights because literally the sun never went down in St. Petersburg at that time. And we'd raise 100% of the budget for the orphanage and the hospital every year. And but sometimes I had to promise people all kinds of crazy stuff in order to get them to play. In the story, you've heard the story, but the one that people just are amazed at was dealing with David Bowie. I'm going, "David, you got to do this festival. We're raising money for kids. They're starving. They're going to die." And he's like, "No, I'm not doing it." And I'm going, "Why?" He goes, I don't really like Russian food. I don't like Russian people. I'm trying not to drink. It's really cold there. I don't like being cold. Just every excuse you could possibly think of for not doing it. And then finally he says, and for me to travel, 10 hours to get to play another concert hall, I'm not doing, I don't want to do that. So I go, "All right, David, there's a fort that's right outside of St. Petersburg, where literally all the rulers of Russia, the czars for the last 500 years, they're all buried at this fort called Peter and Paul Fortress." And I said, "I'll build a stage over the graves of the czars, and you could dance on their graves." And David was like, "Yeah, right. If you could do that, then I'll play." Well, I went and told the mayor. I said, "Listen, I had to promise David Bowie he could dance on the graves of the czars." And he went, "Yeah, whatever you need, no problem. Generators, permit, whatever. Just go tell the vice mayor I said it's okay, and he should work with you to make sure it happens." Well, the vice mayor was this guy named Vladimir Putin, who obviously went up the ladder, and so he and I were, and our partner in St. Petersburg. Uh, we just kept doing this festival and had everybody, literally the who's who of rock and roll, in the '90s there and stuff. And yeah, we built the stage over the graves, and we did that, and everybody was happy. So I had this relationship with Putin, and like I said, when I'm writing the book, I'm thinking about this stuff. I'm going, I was like, I brought Putin to the United States. We were going to do uh, a big press conference at the Russian Tea Room in New York, to try and get sponsors for the festival. And the mayor was supposed to come, but the mayor wasn't feeling well. So he said, "I'm going to send the vice mayor," who was Putin, who, at that time, nobody even thought that he would rise to, become the king of all of Russia. But so Putin came, and Mayor Sobchak's wife came, and daughter came. And we also had we had Henry Kissinger there, who still considered the greatest statesman. So I'm thinking back and I'm going, I introduced Vladimir Putin to Henry Kissinger. I mean, how cool is that? So going back and writing this, just forces you to remember like all this stuff that you just kind of filed away years ago. So.
Well, let's go back to the beginning as far as the E Entertainment Network, because really you changed television. I mean, you changed pop culture. There wasn't what we experience now. Now, my kid doesn't really know. I introduced him to the Goldbergs, and he was so like blown away that a sitcom, because he's so used to reality on TV, but there was no reality on TV until you. Take us back to the very beginning. How did this thing start?
Sure. Well, I worked at Manhattan. When I got out of college, I ended up getting a job literally in the sewers of Manhattan, putting the wires together. I was an assistant. I wasn't even the splicer. I was the assistant splicer. And, they paid me $90 a week. And I just thought it was a temporary job. I said, until I figure out what you do with an economics degree, I'll kind of hang out here and do this. And, so I started there when cable was very young and people were still questioning whether anybody would ever pay for television. Um, but I knew how to read and write, and I was fairly studious, and I kind of worked my way up and in the technical ranks. So I became an installer and a construction guy, and eventually a service guy, and um, so I did that, and then Time Incorporated had bought the company. At that time, it was before Time Warner, so they were really a publishing company, but they decided they wanted to be a media company, and so they bought Manhattan Cable, and then they wanted to expand. And you had all the Harvard and Yaleys on the management side, and here you had a guy who was in the union. Who knew all the technical stuff and what those people do when they go under the streets, who had a college degree that could, converse with them reasonably intelligently. Um, so eventually, they got me to leave the union and go into management, and I ended up there being director of operations. So I think I was 25, maybe 26, and I became director of operations in Manhattan, where all the operating departments, other than finance and programming, reported to me, and I think I had like 305 or 306 people who reported to me, all of which were older, which created an interesting dynamic. Um, but then, kind of right around 1980, all the big cities realized that cable TV was going to be more than just good reception, and they all wanted cable. But they didn't want it to be like you would build out in the suburbs or the rural areas where it would go on telephone poles. They all wanted it to go underground. Well, a Canadian company won the franchise for Los Angeles, but the caveat was it had to go in underground. Well, the only person in the world who knew how you build underground systems was me. So I ended up getting recruited to go out to LA to build Valley Cable, the biggest 61 channel cable system. And I think I was all of 30 years old, 31. And they literally handed me two pieces of paper going, here's the city franchise that they gave us. So here's what you got to build. And here's the bank line from Toronto Dominion for a few $100 million. And, here's where you get the money to do it. And so, but you're a New York kid, and here you are in La La Land, and everybody's going to parties and premieres, and LA is one of the few cities that is really dominated by a single industry. I mean, we have Detroit as the auto industry and stuff, but LA, you're either in the entertainment business or your neighbor is. I mean, there's just no getting around it. And I would see everybody going to all these parties and premieres and stuff, and I said, hey, that would be cool. I want to do that. And I call up the studios, and they go, well, you're really not in the entertainment business. You're a utility like the gas company or the phone company, and no, we're not going to put you on the list. So finally, I got somebody in marketing at one of the studios, and I said, listen, the most effective vehicle you have for marketing a movie is a movie trailer. That 2 minute synopsis of a movie. I said, but the only time I ever see it is when I'm already in the movies. I said, wouldn't you want me to watch that when I'm at home to make me want to go to the movies? And they went, yeah, but we can't really afford 2 minutes of television time for those. I said, okay, great. Tell you what, you give me those, I'll put them on TV for free, because I had 61 channels and nothing to put on. And I said, but you put me on those lists. And they said, yeah, sure, okay. But when we started doing like audience surveys, what's your favorite channel? They go, oh, we love MTV, we love CNN, we love ESPN, we love that trailer channel. And I'm going, wait a second, I'm getting the best 2 minutes of a $50 million movie. Then movies are only 50. I get it for free and people love it. I filed it in the back of my head. But then the company that I worked for, they had sold out and gone back to Toronto. And they said, all right, Larry, you're going to come to Toronto. And I went, no, no, no. I said, I didn't go from New York to LA to go to Toronto. I said, I'm done with being cold. Never again. So, and a friend of mine from New Jersey, Alan Marufka, we were kicking around ideas, because he wanted to stay in LA too. He was from Jersey, and so we said, let's come up with an idea to keep us in LA. And he goes, I've been playing with this idea, MTV of the movies. And I said, wait a second. I said, all MTV is back then when they actually showed music, they would stand a host in front of a green screen and Madonna has a new video. I said, Alan, we could get these movie trailers. People already love them. And we could have a host in front of a green screen and go, and Schwarzenegger has a new movie. So we thought we were brilliant. We wrote a business plan for what was initially called, before it was called Movie Time. And then we changed the name because we wanted to be broader than just about movies. Um, but we wrote the plan. We thought we were brilliant. At that time, the going rate to start a TV network was somewhere between 60 and $100 million. And after literally over 100 pitches, where everybody said, you guys are nice guys, and the idea is not a bad idea, but people don't start TV networks. Only big media companies start TV networks. And 3.5 years later, we finally met some guy on Wall Street um, who had just taken over investment banking for this bond house that he worked for. And we were introduced, and we went in his office, and he had movie posters on the wall, and we're talking to him, and he goes, "Oh, I love this. I used to be the entertainment reporter for my college newspaper," and we're like, "Yeah, yeah, yeah." So he goes, "I really love it, and I want to do it." I said, "Great. Could you give us more like the 100 million than the 60, so we could really do everything that we kind of have in our head to do?" And he goes, "Oh, no, no, no." He goes, "I'm only allowed to sign for 2.5." And I'm like, well, what am I supposed to do with 2.5? I said, the lowest is 60, and the average is 100. And he goes, well, that's all I can sign for. So Alan and I just looked at each other and said, you know what? After 3.5 years, nobody's given us 60 or 100, and we just said, fine, we'll take it. So literally, we took the $2.5 million from this company called Metan Nugent, and I had a friend who was teaching radio, television, film at University of Texas in Austin. And I called him up and I said, Ryan, do you have a bunch of kids that need intern jobs? And he goes, yeah, we had a hard time placing kids this year. I said, send me all you got. So, and he sent 31 kids from Texas for what was supposed to be the summer. And people don't realize, because he is, it's a monster now. It's 142 countries and arguably the largest influencer of pop culture in the world. But he started with 11 employees and 31 interns.
Wow. How about the red carpet? How did the red carpet start? I mean, where did you come up with that idea?
Well, it was funny, because we're looking at, all the things, we were started with movie trailers, and we had hosts and, basically movie jocks as opposed to video jocks. Um, but then we wanted to start, expanding and doing some original programming and stuff. And it was coming up on the Academy Awards, and we said, great, we'll go and we'll cover the Oscars. And we applied for press passes, and we got back this really nasty message going, "Oh, you're some dumb little cable network. How dare you ask us for press passes? We'll never let you on the red carpet." And being a wise ass Brooklyn street kid, I said, "F them. We'll teach them a lesson." So literally, we climbed over the fence and we snuck in, and we're on the red carpet, and we're walking around and we're interviewing people. And at that time, covering award shows, it would be some guy in a suit who would walk around and go, "So, Mr. Cruz, tell me about your next movie." Boring as hell. And here we are, running around going, "Wow, Tom, those are amazing shoes. Where'd you get those? And, who made your suit and who did that?" And then we just realized that people wanted to get to know these celebs on a whole different level as opposed to what's your next movie. Um, what do they do with their kids on the weekend? What's their life? What's their feelings about relationships? And just tying together what we always considered. We said we're not just about the movies. We're pop culture, and that spans. It's not just what I see on TV or what I see in the movies. It's the fashion. It's the music. It's all of it. and there when but yet everybody else was segmenting it, make it very much we're about the movies, no, we were about pop culture. And it just started, people started contacting me and, sending letters or calling and going, oh, that was so amazing. We thought we were watching something we weren't supposed to see. And we're going like, yeah, we snuck into the Academy Awards. They threw us out when they caught us after half an hour. But they did toss us out and stuff. But, that just really confirmed for us that there was a whole new way of approaching, you know, pop culture and celebrities and all this Hollywood stuff.
So, Larry, you're always, Greg Reed says, don't throw the ball to where the receiver is, throw it to where they're going. You're always ahead of the curve. But being ahead of the curve doesn't always give you the greatest spoils. Sometimes it creates mistakes. Like I think I told you, I wasn't ahead of the curve on this thing, but something happened to me in Vegas. A kid came in, wanted a job. I didn't hire him. Later on, I realized it was Brandon Flowers from the Killers. You had things like this because you were so ahead of the curve. Can you talk a little bit about some of the things that being ahead of the curve caused maybe some challenges and maybe not recognizing the person who ended up being?
Oh, well, yeah. I mean, I always say I never get anything right on the first go around, but eventually I get there, because I'm analytical and stuff. And even when I pass on something, I'll still like kind of analyzing it. Did I do the right thing and stuff? And sometimes I just realize, like how dumb were you not to do this? I mean, people like originally Alan came to me, my partner Alan, and is going, oh, our friend Paula is going to be doing an album soon, and it'd be great to have her on the channel. And I'm like, Paul is teaching like LA Laker girls how to cheerlead and stuff. I said, I don't know if that's interesting. Well, that gal was named Paula Abdul, and thank God Alan prevailed in that conversation, and we did have Paula on, and to this day we're still friends with Paula. Um, and then there was this other young guy who always wanted to host, and I'm like, I interviewed him a few times and going, you're such a nice guy, but I don't know if this entertainment stuff is for you. And the guy was Ryan Seacrest, and eventually we gave in and said, all right, we'll put you on camera, we'll see how it goes. And obviously Ryan has done real well. But there is danger of being out and too far out and ahead of the curve. But if you take those things and you make them learning lessons, where you take the failure. I mean, the one that always sticks out to me and a few other people, we back in the heyday of the internet when everybody was buying up domain names and stuff, we owned this domain called television.com. And said this is amazing, and people were offering us, I think it was Barry Diller who offered us like 6 or 7 million to buy the domain, and we were like, no, 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 no. If sex.com sold for 8 million, we're not stupid, we're holding out. And we decided to launch television.com, right in kind of the late 80s. And at that time we were doing videos and stuff, so think of like a YouTube that would have existed 20 something years ago. And but at that time, people, the going rate for advertising was for every 1,000 viewers you delivered, you got $25, which those are good set of economics. Because we didn't have to do a lot to get people to come to it, because they would type in television and we would come up number one in the Google rankings. But what happened was the internet collapsed right around 1998, I believe, and the rates went from $25 per thousand to 25 cents per thousand. But yet for us to serve a video would cost us more like $1. Well, when we were getting the 25, it was great. But when we're getting 25 cents for every, so we're trying to figure out how we stop people from finding the channel. Because the more people that came to it, the more money we lost. But it was just a great example of how you really need to pay attention, not just to the ideas and think you're so smart, but the environment can change, the technology can change, the geography of audience can change. There are so many other factors other than your good idea that you need to pay attention to and stuff. That was a great lesson for me. I think business wise, it's still probably my biggest loss, my biggest loser. Um, we're looking back and going, man, we should have sold that domain name for $7 million.
So throughout this time, as you're building relationships, you sneak onto the red carpet. Oh yeah, you create the largest, pop culture network in the world. Are you cooking for people as you're like when you're inviting them in, like having dinner, things like that? Are they getting Larry's cuisine during this time?
Yeah, I mean, that was the kind of thing that finally convinced me to do the book because when I really thought about it, and quite honestly, my daughter had a baby last year, so I got my first little grandbaby. So I started thinking of things like, okay, what am I going to leave for grandbaby so he remembers grandpa and stuff? I said, maybe I should write the book, and but I realized you could literally take my life. I think I reinvent myself every 7 years. I just become a different person. It's probably a different form of ADD that's not been diagnosed yet. Um, but I said, I can divide my life. I have my growing up in Brooklyn years, my Manhattan cable years, my going to LA years, my years, my China years, my Russia years, now back in the US years. I said, I pretty much can divide my life up into like 8 segments and write anecdotes of the things that happened, the most interesting stories, and then match those with the recipes that inspired me.
Mm.
Because I've been cooking since I'm 12. My real passion is not television. My passion is cooking. Um, and not for restaurants, but I love cooking for family and friends because you just cook in a different mindset. I mean, you're cooking out of love as opposed to at a profit. And so the book is it's actually quite different because it's somewhere between a bio and a cookbook. Um, so yeah, and most of the recipes relate to those certain periods of my life and stuff like that. So
What contributed to the vision part of it? Because we just had an election. Most people don't realize this, but we just had an election, and that election literally teetered on one median of media that wasn't traditional. And there was one interview that happened to be on a podcast that really changed the trajectory. But you brought podcasting into like mainstream before anyone even knew it was coming, right? How are you able to see these things? And could you tell the story about this one? Because this one blew me away.
wait, which one is that? Which one
This
are we?
this is putting a camera in a radio
Oh, okay.
station.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. So we met this guy in an elevator in New York, this tall guy, and he was telling us he does a radio show in New York, and we were like, yeah, 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 that's good. Alan and I are looking at each other, going, does this guy not know that radio's been dead for God knows how long? But he's like, come and watch my show, and we went there, and you know, I was blown away, but totally by the guy, and yeah, I went back to LA and was talking to our team who, originally when we came up with the idea of Talk Soup, it was, the team was going, Larry, what's wrong with you? You want to do a TV show that makes fun of TV shows. And I'm like, yeah, obviously Talk Soup went on to be good. But then when I said, I want to put cameras in this guy's radio studio, they were like, Larry, radio's dead 40 years. Why would we do that? Nobody cares about radio. And I just said, you know what? You don't understand that this is really a sitcom. This is not a radio show. There was an old TV show in the US called WKRP in Cincinnati, which is all about this group of wacky characters that did this radio show and they worked at the station. I said, this is the reality TV version of this. And, so obviously, I mean, the guy was Howard Stern, and obviously Howard went on to do pretty well. And, but yeah, I mean, for whatever reason, just certain things are just so obvious to me. And again, I think a lot of it has to do with kind of like get your ego out of the way. Like if I would approach it going like, I only want to do things where I could win a Academy Award, I probably wouldn't have done half the things that I did. It was just Hollywood is funny stuff. Why make believe it's anything more than that? Just have fun with it. Give people something to go to bed with a smile on their face.
I think one of the most interesting things when you came out to the Vibe Room in Salt Lake. When I say one of the most interesting things, I can say that about anything in your life. But you talked about the difference in business where people get caught up in just locking into their passion. Where this is something that we hear all the time. Follow your passion. Follow your passion. You actually said the opposite. You just said it a second ago because you said you're passionate about food, but your business is something else. Can you talk about this? Because I think this is so important for people to hear.
Yeah, and I see this all the time, and I try and talk to young entrepreneurs, and they, some once in a while I get one who listens to me, but most of the time they think I'm nuts because they've been brought up with this follow your passion thing. Well, we all are on this planet for a very finite period of time. I mean, some of us will get to 70, some of us will get to 90, but we're all going to be gone at some point. So the most valuable thing that we all have is our time. Um, and you got to use that time the most efficient way. So a lot of people, get involved and follow your passion, but we all have certain realities. We have to eat, we have to pay the rent, we have to feed our family, and do all of that stuff. So if following your passion is not going to lead to a viable revenue stream, a financial business, you're not going to be able to sustain it very long because you've got to start paying the rent, or you're going to just go on for a long time suffering because it's never going to be anything. And people don't realize you got to look at these things and say, you know what, maybe it was a good idea yesterday, but the geography of the media business has changed, or the technology has changed, or the business environment has changed. The ability to look at something and saying, you know what, I thought it was good, wasn't so good. Next, how do you maximize the value of your time? And I always say to people, rather than just follow your passion, some people are passionate about knitting and sewing. Well, you're not going to make a living out of knitting and sewing. Well, most people won't anyway. But you know, I say find something that you're good at, that you like, and just work your butt off and become great at it. And that will become your passion.
Mm. What about the transitions? Let's talk about the transitions because you were doing like, say, you came up with the idea, Talk Soup. You threw it out there. Hey, we're going to talk about other TV shows and make fun of them, right? We're going to be able to do that. Then you go into, hey, I'm going to follow this family around that ultimately is going to become like the royalty in the United States. It literally is. Like when kids talk about it, every person knows this family's name. How did you transition into that, and where did you come up with the idea for that to happen?
Well, yeah, I was friends with Chris Jenner and Bruce when Bruce was still Bruce. But then the girls were little. But I got to say, Chris was really the brain and the mastermind behind a lot of that stuff. I mean, he was the vehicle that let them shine, but Chris was really the driving force of that family and getting the girls into the mindset of what they can do and how to maximize their value and how to really dominate pop culture. And
How does
so
she
yeah,
pitch it,
but I
Larry? How does she pitch it to you when Chris comes to you? Because this is before this had happened. How does a person come in? I've got a family. I want everyone to know about my family. I'm going to film my family. This is going to be the next big thing.
Yeah, well, again, the girls were little, and the rules of putting children on television, underage children, are really, really strict and restrictive. And, we were a young fledgling network and we didn't have a lot of money. So we couldn't afford to have teachers on the set and, do all those things. So we just kind of said, hey, Chris, great idea. When the girls are, of age, let's go talk about it again. But really what brought us all together, this is actually one of the things that's in the book. We Alan was going. We were going to start another TV network that was called FX TV before Fox, and we were going to start FX TV was going to be fitness and exercise television. And Bruce was the number one athlete in the world. I mean, he was the guy. He was the cover of the Wheaties box and stuff like that. So it was. So we were all partners. So Bruce and Chris were one of the partners. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar was another partner. Unfortunately, our other partner was a guy named O.J. Simpson, which is a whole other story, um, which is actually in the book. That story's in the book. Um, so we were all trying to build this new TV network for fitness and exercise. It was before digital, so that everything was analog, so that when you put a show on at 7 o'clock at night, it was time anchored and stuff. And we eventually got out, and we had a big fight with Fox over the name because we registered and we owned the name FX, and they decided they wanted to start a TV network, and they thought they'd bully us around. And they went and told the judge, well, if you put an O between the F and the X, it spells Fox. We're like, okay, good for you. We won that case too, by the way. And then we eventually just sold them the name. But so we go back, a long time. I still have, pictures of Bruce and Chris coming to my house for Christmas parties and stuff like that. And the girls were tiny and stuff. And they just grew up in an environment where um, they they were nurtured.
And so, did you realize that it was going to become as big as what it is now? Did you say, could you see that?
Yeah, the Kardashians or the
Yeah,
TV network?
the Kardashians.
Uh, no, no, not. We thought it was good and we thought it was interesting, but no. Um, uh, a lot of people, when you turn the cameras on them, they begin to act. That
Uh-huh.
family was natural. They just, you know, realized that the cameras are on. So what? They just went on living their life and in front of the camera, and it certainly resonated with audiences all around the world.
So I think the cool thing, every time that I see you, there's something new. Like one time you invited us up and we got to see some AI robots. They were doing some calisthenics. I mean, I've never seen anything like this. And now I'm starting to see that, oh, the world is catching on. What is Larry working on right now that the world will catch on in 6, 8 months?
Well, I'm a big fan of AI. I think there are dangers to it, and I think our regulators need to really dig in and create a set of rules there. I mean, it's to me, it's like I always use the example of driving a car. A 12-year-old can't say, "Hey, I feel like driving. Take the keys, get in the car, and drive." They got to be a certain age. They got to take driver's education. They have to. Uh, Take a test, they have to obey the rules of the road, or there are consequences. With AI, our regulators have been kind of taking this fearful position of like, we don't understand it, so we're not going to touch it. Um, there need to be consequences so bad people know that you're not allowed to do bad things. So, that part has to catch up. But I love AI. I think I was mentioning to you. If you were to ask me, say, Larry, could you design a TV show series about spoons, whatever the subject is? It used to take me about 5 days to go, okay, what could that be? And, kind of get it and do the research and who's the audience, where are they? And then come out with a kind of a little document saying, okay, here's my take on whatever that subject was. But now with AI, and I've been using it literally from the first day that ChatGPT came out, um, I can do the same thing in 30 seconds. It doesn't come out 100% correct.
Hmm.
It takes me an hour to clean it up because you have to provide the human element. At the end of the day, it's storytelling. And, people are good at storytelling and machines are not very good at storytelling. So I clean it up. So now it takes me an hour to do what used to take me 5 days. And again, you go back to my thing about time being the most valuable thing we have. I'm saying, you know what? So now I could do either more of these and make more money, or I have more time to spend with my grandbaby, or I could learn how to speak Spanish, or I could go on a vacation to the Caribbean. I've reclaimed the most valuable thing that we as human beings have, and that's time on this planet. Um, so yeah, there's dangers to AI. So I love AI. I think if you combine AI with holograms, you can create an educational system that is much more balanced and fair and is global or universal. I mean, one of the things that I've been involved in and toying with is if you go and look at a college, um, you know, lecture room, You got 500 kids falling asleep and one boring professor doing a speech on whatever. I said, but I was on the advisory board of the Einstein Foundation. When Albert died, he left all his IP to Hebrew University. And I said, what if we can create the digital twin of Albert Einstein, and I could use it as a hologram, and I could beam him into any university on the planet, and he could teach everybody the theory of relativity. I said, because it's AI, in China he could speak Mandarin, in Russia he speaks Russian, in South Africa he's speaking Afrikaana. Um, so literally, I could take the best teacher of whatever subject, and we could teach anybody in the world from the point of view of the best teacher. So you don't have to go to Harvard. We could bring Harvard to you.
What do
So
you?
I love that.
That's incredible. How far do you see that that's away?
Oh, the hologram stuff. Everybody's looking at holograms as entertainment. Like we'll recreate the Temptations or that stuff. And there's a role for that. I mean, there's some really great hologram music acts that are particularly in Asia. In Taiwan, there's a great one that's going on 5 or 6 years now. Um, but the technology for that is there. It's the application of the technologies combining AI with holograms, and somebody's got to see the profitability ultimately
Yeah.
in it. So I think we'll see it within the next 3 or 4 years. You'll start to see more and more of that out there.
What is your take on there's seems to be two sides of the fence. One, find an audience, like say 35 to 50, figure out what they want, create content that will be exactly what it is that they want. The flip side of it is like the Howard Stern that says, I'm Howard Stern, I'm going to do this thing, and the audience will show up. Which part do you subscribe to, or do you subscribe to both?
I subscribe to both, and it depends on the circumstances. Right now, Um, when I got involved in the business, you had to come to Hollywood to make visual entertainment. You needed the big sound stages and the cameras that were running 250,000 a camera and stuff like that. So you couldn't just make visual entertainment anywhere you wanted to without having those resources. But now you look at the way technology has changed and stuff. I could take my iPhone and go to Nigeria tomorrow afternoon and make a movie. And so you have um, this opportunity where, if you were doing stuff way back then, when we only had 3 networks, you needed tens of millions of viewers in order to justify the cost of making an hour of entertainment. So you basically had to dilute your thoughts to appeal to the lowest common denominator. Is how do I get the biggest audience? Because I need 10 million people to watch it in order to justify the advertising dollars we're charging and stuff like that. But then you had cable come along and cable networks, and instead of a few, tens of millions, you needed a few 100,000 people to watch something and stuff. So now you could get into niches. That's where you start to see, if you really like sports, ESPN. Used to be the news used to be on only at 11 o'clock, 6 o'clock, and 11 o'clock at night. And then you got CNN um, because the economics changed so that you could begin to do those kind of things. And then the internet came. But now you've got the world of podcasting where you could find very, very passionate audiences that really know a subject, but yet they're underserved by big media because big media doesn't want to reach 30,000 people and stuff. There's no set of numbers, but the cost of doing the podcast now are become so inexpensive that you could just look and say, where could I find niches that would love to have something that really was true and authentic to a subject, but yet it's not being touched by the big media companies out there. So we've actually just jumped into the podcast world. And I like it because, for me, even still, I go in and I pitch something to a network. And, usually my ideas are a little, off the mainstream. And they look at me and they go, well, Larry, what's it like? And I'm going, it's not like anything. It's new, it's different, it's unique. And it's frustrating. I feel like I'm banging my head against the wall. But with the podcast world, it's so inexpensive to do it right, and we could get into that subject. Um, that I don't have to go to the gatekeepers. I could do whatever I want. I could be as creative as I want. I could prove the concepts work and show that the audience is there and how we could expand the audience and how we could make something profitable, um, without having to compromise it to that lowest common denominator thing. So
Mm.
I love the podcast world now. We started our first one called Stall Talk,
Hmm.
which is uh, it just show you how my mind works. Whenever you go out to dinner with a few couples, like one woman invariably says, "I got to go to the restroom," and they all get up and go. And the guys are sitting there going, "Where have they been for 15 minutes? What are they doing in there? What are they talking about?" Well, most of the time they're talking about us, but there's all kinds of other. But it's really it's almost a metaphor for this camaraderie among women of all generations and all ages. They may not agree on subjects, but there's this underlying respect and love that women have for each other. And I've always been fascinated with that because other than in sports, us guys don't do that. We don't share our feelings and talk about, hey, you got to get T-shirts from this brand or anything like that. Um, so we created Stall Talk, and it's women of four different generations, from a boomer down to Gen Zs and two in betweens, and they'll talk about it. It could be current events, and it could just be things like relationships, a family, and dealing with things that women deal with every day, where they normally only would talk about them when they had their girlfriends in the restroom and they were away from the guys. So it's basically this platform for women to express themselves, and we've been getting amazing feedback on it. Women are saying, "Wow, that's like so cool." It's all these things that I always talk to my friends about that I never thought could be shared any place but, in the private, in our privacy and stuff. And here they have that opportunity. And so we really have fallen in love with the podcast world.
Yeah.
And some of it we think is a way to kind of show our friends at the networks that they're not really seeing the world the way it is and the way it's changed. I mean, when I go in, if I talk to a network person about Stall Talk, they go, "Yeah, Larry, that's interesting, but women under 40 don't watch television." And I'm going, "Did you ever think they don't watch television is because you don't program anything they want to watch?" And they like look at me and they go like, "What do you mean?" I go, "It's simple. If you're not going to program what they want to watch, why would they want to turn on the television?" Um, and again, when I say television, I don't mean linear television where you got to watch at 8 o'clock. It's things could launch at a certain time, but then they got to be available streaming. We believe you got to program, for people to watch what they want to watch when they want to watch it on whatever device they want to watch it. There's no you program for this or that. I don't think of myself as a TV producer. I think of myself as a storyteller, and I tell stories on different devices at different times.
The conversation that you and I had, and I know you got to get going here in a second, but the conversation that you and I had right outside, James calls it right outside of Nashville. We call it deep Alabama. But when we were talking, you were talking about the evolution and this monumental thing that's happening with movies as far as coming in little bits as opposed to the other part. And this really blew my mind. Can you share that part of where
Sure,
movies are going?
one of the good things about the stuff we do in China is because it's almost like a lab for us. Because they are ahead of us in certain technologies, and there's not a lot of legacy stuff. So it's easier to break the rules in China for me, and than it is here, because here they're always like, well, that's not the way we do it. Well, in China they didn't do it anyway, so whatever you do, it's fine. But the rage, and it started here. I see a few folks trying to start up. So you make a movie inexpensively, 300 to 500,000 to make a movie, which is very inexpensive. And typically the ones that are doing the best now are romantic comedies and stuff,
Okay.
because people could relate to that stuff all over the world. So you take this movie, and it's it's 90 minutes. Doesn't need to be exactly 90. It could be a little more, a little less. And you break it up into 2 minute segments. So a 90-minute movie becomes 45 2 minute segments. And in order to make these so that they're really good, I mean, I found the best people to hire are people who used to write soap operas, because people don't realize soap operas are written in 2-minute chunks. I mean, the story arcs are 2 minutes. So they're great at writing these because there's a continuity. So you have this 45 2-minute segments and you give the first 10 away. So I give you 10 and you watch them and you go, this is really great. I love this. But now if you want to watch number 11 to number 45, you pay $1. And you go, you know what? Yeah, $1. Let me see number 11 and let me see number 12. And so when you think about the economics, you now have 35 episodes that you're getting $1 for. So on this $300,000 movie, you're getting $35, which is twice the cost of a movie ticket to go to a theater. So the numbers are astronomical in China. People who are doing these things, they're investing $300,000-$400,000 and getting returns of $3, $4, $5 million
Wow.
on a project like that. You were starting to see it happen here. I don't think the audience is ready for it here, but it will be.
What do you see with the podcasting world, uh, and also what do you wish that people understood about it? Meaning that, do you see that in the podcasting world, it ends up, because I know you've been pitching Stall Talk, and Stall Talk's been doing so amazing. If you haven't watched it, you guys need to go and check it out. But is that the progression, pitching it to a network, or do those kind of things stay in their own ecosystem?
Well, it could be either or. It doesn't necessarily have to be one. I mean, we don't design stuff saying, eventually we want to turn this into a television series. Although Stall Talk is a little different because to me, Stall Talk should be the replacement for The View. I mean, people keep wondering why the ratings go down and stuff. I'm going, because nobody relates to it. But the one thing that we've done with the podcasting, most people do a podcast, they do it from their bedroom. They have a cheap camera, they have a lamp. Technical quality is not good, but with any new technology, when it first comes out, people are very forgiving about production value
Yeah.
and stuff. It's not lit right, it doesn't sound exactly right and stuff. We just said, you know what? We're going to go to the other end of that. We know where that's going to go. We could argue whether it's going to be a year away, 2 years away, 3 years away. So we said we're going to start. So we shoot Stall Talk actually in a studio, not but a podcast studio. We shoot it with 4 cameras in 4K. We have an audio engineer who's designed the audio. We have a lighting engineer who's designed the lighting. We have a set designer. So when you look at it, and you can get it on YouTube or any of the platforms, it looks like a TV talk show, as opposed to somebody with a $30 camera in their bedroom.
Yes. And what do you see as far as, what do you see the future part of, like, say, with podcasting? Because I just heard a stat the other day. There's somewhere in the midst of 4 or 5 million podcasts, but there's only 400,000 active podcasts. And then the number continues to go how you define active.
Yeah. Again, you get to that thing with we all have the realities of life. We got to eat. So everybody's like, oh, I'll start a podcast. Well, you get married, you got kids, you got a job, whatever. You can't do that podcast the way you were unless you were making money at it. Most people are not making money at it. And unless you could find that way to self-sustain it financially, they typically disappear. So we think everybody rushed to do it, that number will continue to go down. And you'll be left with, I mean, there's some great stuff, and it really does enable you to do, I call it super serving. You could take a community of interest, no matter what it is, and you could provide a level of detail and authenticity that you never could achieve if you had to dilute it to reach a bigger audience. And you really can get a very engaged audience. And I think that's what sponsors are going to end up paying. It's not just how many did you reach, it's how many did you reach and motivate them to do something, whatever that something is, buy the product or, or feel better about the brand, and stuff like that. So it takes some time. But I think you're seeing the movement that way where you need to figure out how to bring sponsors in. And the way you bring them in is to show them what the benefit is to whatever their business is.
From every New Yorker that I know, every one of my friends, they always tell me that the pizza is different in New York. They always tell me that there's this one ingredient, and I was like, okay, what is it? Where can I buy it? And they're like, it's the water. Right. And they
Water.
talk about the water with the bagels and they talk about the water with the pizza. And they say you could have all the ingredients, but if you don't have that one specific, it's not going to be the same. When someone is constructing, whether it be a book or a TV show, a podcast, entertainment for people, what is the one little ingredient that most people are overlooking, Larry, that is literally right in front of their face?
Well, it's the whole concept of generating emotion, and it could be love them or hate them. I mean, when we first cast E, and again, we didn't have a lot of money, but we realized with that limited amount of money, um, we weren't going to wow people with fancy production value. We said we're going to put our money into finding the best hosts we could find, love them or hate them, but feel something for them. And people always say to me now, they go, "Oh, Larry, you were so lucky you had all those amazing hosts. You had Greg Kinnear, Academy Award. Julie Moran went on to be the first woman to do Wide World of Sports. Katie Wagner, Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous. Mark DiCarlo, Studs, et cetera, et cetera." That was not a mistake. That was not by chance. And we realized that we needed to really focus on that. I think we interviewed almost 10,000 people, and I think we put over 7,000 people on tape to pick those first five. Um, and stuff. And and that turned out to be the smartest thing we ever did, because people would just go, you know what, I'm coming home from work at 5 o'clock. I don't really know what he's got on today, but I love that Kinnear guy. I'm going to watch him. And that just kept. It was the people who brought them back. And again, love them or hate them, feel something from.
So I started the podcast because of my two kids, Maddox and McKenna. Maddox is 13 years old, plays sports. My daughter is in the arts now and singing, dancing, performing, all the things. What advice would you have for Maddox and McKenna? And if you could use both their names, that would be awesome.
Well, I think financial wellness is. I think the whole. Are we back?
Yeah, we're back. We're back. So
Yeah.
we it cut out right when you were about to talk.
Sure. I think the whole issue of financial wellness is something that I think every kid has to learn that, regardless of where you go. I mean, if your kids want to pursue their art, craft, whatever, professionally, they got to learn how to pick a good manager. They have to learn how to read a contract. They have to learn that basic stuff to protect themselves and to be successful in it. Because it's not just a matter of being a great artist, it's a matter of being able to manage your career as a great artist. So, and I think that goes for anything. Is there's a certain level of financial knowledge that everybody needs to have. And we're just not teaching it in schools anymore.
Larry, what would be the one recipe that in the event that a person was fortunate enough to have you cook for them, that they would never want to go anyplace else and they would be beating down your door every single day?
Well, I think the one that amazes people the most is I can cook Chinese food as good as any Chinese person on the planet. So when I really want to wow people, I'll do like Chinese food and they're like amazed. Even to the point where, when I was in China, when they discovered that I really could cook Chinese food, I ended up having a TV show on Beijing TV, which was loosely titled The White Boy Cooks Chinese Food. And we had 4 episodes of a cooking show that was me cooking. So yeah, it's mainly the Chinese food.
So, Larry, last one is how do you know when to shift and pivot? You are a master at this. How do you know when it's, we talk about perseverance or, locking in, become the best at it and work at it till it comes. But there's also times where you say, you know what, give up the ghost. Let's move on to something else. Mm-hmm. How do you know when that is?
Well, I mean, it's just an innate feeling and stuff. And again, it really has to do with being very honest with yourself. I mean, I wake up in the morning, I have 10 new ideas. By the time I go to sleep, I like look at them. I look at all my stuff literally every night. I evaluate what I'm doing or thinking of doing and stuff. And a lot of times you just got to look at it and go, I don't know what I was thinking this morning. That was pretty dopey. Next. And you have to just realize that you're not going to have great ideas all the time. And if you waste your time on it, you're not leaving room to do the stuff that really can become something and help you propel your life into new directions.
Larry, it has been amazing to be able to spend time with you. I know you got a lot of appointments today, and you're going to be changing the world. The things that your one of 10 ideas that you've got today is going to become our reality in the next 5 years. And I'm looking forward to it. The book, Offscript, Recipes for Success. You guys have to get it. It's unbelievable. And just to be able to spend time with you and hear your stories. This is just a scratch in the surface. So I want to have you on again because we need to talk about more of the stories that you have, Larry.
And anytime.
I appreciate you, my man. You're officially off the hot seat.
All righty. Take care.
Nothing more on my mind. I got to shine, so every day I grind. Work in the morning, work in the evening. We's achieving, cause we believing. It's for certain, we put the work in. We ain't stopped just because it's hurting. Right before your eyes, so it's coming to no surprise. The takeover is televised. Over and over and over again. Make no mistake, we continue to win. Defeat never known, cause I will not lose. They wanna mimic my moves, but can't walk in